Untold Black Stories. In this video, we share the story of Sinatra Jordan, a powerful and deeply personal account of his experience with the criminal justice system. If you're interested in learning more or diving deeper into the details of his case, we've included links to various sources, news articles, and reports in the description below. They call this country the land of the free. The land where justice is blind, where everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But let me ask you something, is that really true? Or is that just a story we like to tell ourselves? Because today, I want to share a story that shatters that illusion, a story that forces us to confront a truth many would rather ignore. His name is Sinatra Jordan. A young black man from Mississippi who became the face of a nightmare that too many people in my community know too well. He was accused of something he didn't do, of something he couldn't have done. Shooting at police officers. A crime that, if proven, could have taken his entire life away. But here's the thing, there was no gun. No fingerprints. No bullet casings that tied him to the scene. Nothing but the weight of suspicion, fueled by fear, bias, and a justice system that's been broken for generations. And for that, Sinatra Jordan spent 940 days in jail. Not because he was proven guilty. But because in this system, sometimes just being accused is enough to strip you of everything, your freedom, your dignity, your hope. Let that number sink in. 940 days. That's over 2.5 years. Imagine missing 2 birthdays. 2 Christmases. 2 years of your child growing up, of your mother's health declining, of your world moving forward, while you sit in a cage, waiting. Waiting for a justice system that seems to have forgotten you exist. And the worst part? Sinatra's story isn't unique. It's not an outlier. Across this country, there are thousands of people, disproportionately black and brown, sitting in jails right now, not because they've been convicted of a crime, but because they can't afford to buy their way out of pretrial detention. Because they're too poor, too powerless, too invisible. We like to think that justice is fair. That if you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. But stories like Sinatra's force us to ask the hard questions: who is justice really for? Who gets the benefit of the doubt? And who gets crushed under the weight of a system that was never built to protect them in the first place? This isn't ancient history. This didn't happen decades ago. Sinatra Jordan was arrested in 2022. His fight for freedom didn't happen in some dark chapter of American history, it happened right here, right now, while we were scrolling through our phones and going about our daily lives. And that's why his story matters. Because it's not just about him, it's about all of us. It's a mirror held up to a system that needs to change. And until it does, none of us are truly safe. Today, I'm going to walk you through what happened to Sinatra. We'll go back to the beginning, to who he was before that terrible day, and we'll trace every step of his journey, his arrest, his time behind bars, his fight for justice, and what his story tells us about the country we live in. This is more than just a story. This is a wake-up call. Let's begin. Before his name became a headline, before he was another statistic in America's broken justice system, Sinatra Jordan was just a regular guy. A son, a brother, a friend. Someone with dreams, with flaws, with a life that mattered. Sinatra grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, a city rich in history but scarred by deep wounds of poverty, segregation, and injustice. His neighborhood wasn't easy. Like so many black communities across America, it was a place where opportunities felt out of reach and where the weight of systemic racism was part of everyday life. Sinatra knew that weight all too well. His mom, Denise, worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on and food on the table. His dad? Not really in the picture. So from a young age, Sinatra had to step up, not just for himself, but for his little sister, Mia. He wasn't perfect, he made his share of mistakes, but ask anyone who knew him, and they'll tell you, Sinatra was loyal. Hardworking. The kind of guy who'd give you his last dollar if you needed it more than he did. He loved music, yeah, his mom named him after the other Sinatra, but his own taste leaned more towards hip-hop and R&B. He'd freestyle with his friends after work, dreaming of making it big one day. But dreams like that are hard to chase when you're busy just trying to survive. At 24, Sinatra was working part-time at a local auto shop, picking up shifts wherever he could. He was saving up, hoping to eventually start his own business, a detailing service, maybe even his own garage. He wanted something better, not just for himself but for Mia too. He used to tell her, "One day, we're gonna get out of here. You'll see." But dreams have a way of being interrupted, especially when you're a young black man in America. And on August 14, 2022, everything changed. In a matter of minutes, Sinatra Jordan went from being a man with plans and purpose, to a suspect. To a headline. To another black face in a mugshot that people scrolled past without ever knowing the story behind it. And that's the thing. Stories like Sinatra's often get reduced to soundbites. To stereotypes. But behind every headline is a human being. Someone with a family, with fears, with a future that deserved more than to be stolen by a system stacked against him from the start. Sinatra Jordan was more than a case number. He was a young man just trying to make it through, in a world that too often set him up to fail. It was a hot, sticky August afternoon, the kind of day where the air feels heavy and every sound seems amplified. Sinatra had just finished a shift at the auto shop. His clothes smelled like oil and sweat, and all he wanted was to grab a cold drink and head home. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just another day, trying to keep his head down. He was walking through his neighborhood, nodding at familiar faces, texting his sister to let her know he'd be home soon. That's when he heard it, the sirens. Loud. Close. Too close. Before he could even turn around, police cars screeched to a halt. Officers jumped out, weapons drawn, barking orders. Get on the ground. Hands where we can see them. The street, which had been full of life just moments earlier, fell eerily silent. People froze. Mothers pulled their kids back. Everyone knew the drill, but no one expected this. Sinatra's heart raced. Confused, scared, but knowing, like every black man in America knows, that the wrong move, the wrong look, could mean death. He dropped to his knees, hands raised high, his voice shaking, "I didn't do anything. What's going on?" But the officers weren't listening. They rushed him, forced him face down on the pavement, cuffed him tight. One of them pressed a knee into his back, too hard, making it hard to breathe. Sinatra kept asking, over and over, "What did I do? What did I do?" And then the words that would haunt him for the next 940 days, "You're under arrest for attempted murder of a police officer." His mind went blank. Attempted murder? A police officer? It made no sense. He hadn't even seen a gun that day, let alone fired one. But none of that mattered in the moment. He was thrown into the back of the squad car, head spinning, wrists burning from the cuffs. On the way to the station, he tried to piece together what was happening. He heard fragments, something about a shooting earlier that day, officers claiming shots had been fired at them during a chase. But Sinatra hadn't been anywhere near that. No one seemed to care. By the time they arrived at the precinct, the story had already started to spread. Local news outlets reported, "Man arrested for firing at police." His name. His face. His mugshot, plastered everywhere before he even had a chance to speak. Sinatra's phone, now confiscated, blew up with messages from friends and family, panicked and confused. Mia, his little sister, was crying hysterically when his mom called. Denise rushed to the station, demanding answers, but got nothing but cold stares and legal jargon. That night, alone in a cold, dirty cell, Sinatra sat on the edge of a metal bench, staring at the wall. His world had been ripped out from under him in a matter of hours. And for the first time, a terrifying thought crept into his mind. What if I never get out? This was the beginning of a nightmare he couldn't have imagined in his worst dreams. And as he would soon learn, in this system, being innocent isn't always enough. The first night was the hardest. But Sinatra quickly learned, every night after that would be just as brutal. His new world was a 6 by 9 foot cell. Concrete walls, a thin mattress on a metal slab, and a toilet right out in the open. No privacy. No peace. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The constant echo of shouting, banging, doors slamming. It was like the noise never stopped, outside or inside his head. The jail was overcrowded, underfunded, and dangerous. Fights broke out over nothing. Guards barked orders but offered no protection. You were expected to fend for yourself, to toughen up or break down. Sinatra wasn't a hardened criminal, he was just a guy who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that didn't matter here. In this place, everyone wore the same uniform. Everyone was treated like they were already guilty. Day after day, week after week, he waited. For a court date that kept getting pushed back. For evidence that never seemed to surface. For a justice system that moved at a snail's pace, if it moved at all. His public defender, overworked and underpaid, told him, it might be a while before we can get this in front of a judge. A while? How long is a while when you're sitting in a cage for a crime you didn't commit? Sinatra's mental health started to crumble. He couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Anxiety wrapped around him like a vice. Nights were the worst, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying that day over and over in his mind, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Wondering if he'd ever see freedom again. Letters from home kept him going. His mom wrote every week, her words filled with love and worry. Mia sent drawings, little pictures of them together, sunshine and smiling faces. It broke his heart. He didn't want her to see him like this. He didn't want her to remember this version of her big brother. And then there was the money. Bail had been set so high there was no way his family could afford it. Denise tried everything, asking friends, taking out loans, but it was impossible. The system was designed that way, a pay-to-play game where freedom is for sale, but only if you have the cash. The longer Sinatra stayed inside, the more invisible he felt. Friends stopped calling. The news cycle moved on. Even people who'd once said, "Free Sinatra," on social media faded into silence. It was like he'd fallen into a black hole, and no one on the outside could really understand what it felt like to be trapped like this. But the worst part wasn't the cold food or the dirty showers or even the endless waiting. The worst part was the not knowing. Not knowing when, or if, this nightmare would end. Because when you're black, poor, and accused, innocence isn't your shield, it's just another story the system refuses to hear. For a long time, it felt like Sinatra was fighting alone. But the thing about truth? It doesn't always stay buried forever. His mom, Denise, refused to let the system swallow her son. She showed up at every hearing, stood outside the jail with signs, and started knocking on doors, journalists, activists, anyone who would listen. "My son didn't do this," she said, over and over. "They've got the wrong man." At first, no one seemed to care. Just another case in an overworked court system, just another black man behind bars. But Denise didn't give up. She found a local grassroots group that fights wrongful convictions. They listened. And then they started digging. Piece by piece, the cracks in the case began to show. Body cam footage was incomplete. Witness statements were shaky, some even conflicting. And the biggest red flag? There was never any weapon recovered that could link Sinatra to the alleged shooting. No fingerprints. No ballistics. Nothing but suspicion and assumption. The activists launched a campaign, #FreeSinatra started trending locally. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that said, "Innocent until proven black," and "Where's the evidence?" The noise got louder, and finally, the media took notice. Local reporters began asking tough questions. How had this man been held for so long with no trial, no clear evidence? Why was the system dragging its feet? Sinatra's new legal team, brought in through donations and community support, filed motions, demanding a full review of the case. They exposed procedural failures, pointing out how the case had been built more on assumptions than facts. They argued what should have been clear from the start: there was no real case. But the prosecution wasn't quick to back down. They stalled, delayed, fought to keep him behind bars. Because once the system puts a target on your back, it doesn't like to admit it was wrong. And all the while, Sinatra waited. He watched news clips on the tiny TV in the common room. He read letters from strangers who now knew his name, who told him to stay strong. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth would win out. But nothing came easy. Every small victory was met with more roadblocks. Every glimpse of daylight seemed to close up again. Still, the pressure kept building, the voices kept rising. And slowly, the walls around Sinatra's case started to crack. Because when a community refuses to be silent, when people keep pushing, keep asking, keep fighting, change, no matter how slow, becomes possible. It was a Wednesday morning when the news finally came. After 940 days, 940 long, brutal days, a judge signed the order. The case against Sinatra Jordan was dismissed. Just like that. After years of stolen time, the system quietly tried to clean up its mess. Denise was the first to hear. She dropped the phone and sank to her knees, tears of relief and exhaustion mixing together. Mia, now a little older, clung to her mom, crying too, this time, happy tears. When Sinatra stepped out of those jail doors, the sunlight felt unreal. He stood there for a moment, breathing it in like it was the first time. The crowd outside cheered. Activists, friends, strangers who had come to stand with him, they were all there, holding up signs and fists, welcoming him back to a world that had moved on without him. His mom ran to him first, wrapping him in a hug that seemed to last forever. Sinatra held her tight, eyes closed, whispering, "We made it, Mama. We made it." But freedom, as he quickly learned, came with its own weight. He was free, but not really. Because how do you get back nearly 3 years of your life? How do you repair the relationships that suffered, rebuild the dreams that crumbled, heal the wounds that no one else can see? His body was thinner. His eyes were harder. There were moments when he'd smile, but you could tell, part of him was still locked up inside. Reporters asked him how he felt. Sinatra was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm grateful to be out. But let's be real, this never should have happened. I lost time I can't get back. My family lost time. And there are still people sitting in there right now, just like I was, waiting for a system that doesn't see them." He wasn't wrong. While Sinatra's case had ended, the fight was far from over. His story had become a symbol, of resistance, of injustice, of a system that still needed tearing down and rebuilding from the ground up. In the weeks that followed, Sinatra tried to settle back into life. He spent quiet nights at home, catching up with his sister, eating his mom's cooking, simple things that felt like miracles after so long behind bars. He started talking with legal advocates about how to use his story to push for change. He wasn't just a victim anymore, he was becoming a voice. But the scars? They were still there. Trust was fragile. Sleep didn't come easy. And the anger, the deep, simmering anger, was something he'd have to wrestle with for a long time. Because while he was free, the truth remained, justice delayed is justice denied. And no apology, no quiet dismissal of charges, could ever make up for what was stolen. Sinatra Jordan's story is heartbreaking. But what's even more heartbreaking is that it's not rare. Not even close. Across America, on any given day, more than 400,000 people sit in jails waiting for their day in court, not because they've been convicted of a crime, but because they can't afford bail. The overwhelming majority of them are poor. And a disproportionate number are black or brown. Think about that, hundreds of thousands of people, presumed innocent under the law, trapped in a system where freedom depends not on guilt or innocence, but on the size of your bank account. Bail was supposed to be a way to ensure people returned for trial. But in practice, it's become a tool that punishes poverty. If you've got money, you walk free while you await trial. If you don't, you wait in a cell, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, like Sinatra did. And here's where race comes in. Study after study has shown that black defendants are more likely to face higher bail amounts than white defendants accused of the same crimes. They're also more likely to be seen as a flight risk, or a danger to the community, even when there's no real evidence to back that up. It's a reflection of the deep biases baked into every corner of the system, from policing to prosecution to the courts themselves. It's not just about bail, either. Pre-trial detention has ripple effects that can wreck lives. People lose their jobs, their homes, even custody of their children while they wait. Mental health deteriorates. Physical health suffers. And worst of all, being locked up pre-trial increases the chances of being convicted, even when you're innocent. Why? Because the pressure to take a plea deal, just to get out, becomes overwhelming. Sinatra's case also exposed another ugly truth: once you're accused, the burden of proof often flips. Sure, the law says you're innocent until proven guilty. But in reality, once you're in that jumpsuit, behind those bars, society starts treating you as if you must have done something wrong. And that stigma, it sticks, long after the charges are dropped, long after the headlines fade. There have been efforts to change this. States like New York and New Jersey have taken steps to reform their bail systems. Activists across the country are pushing for legislation that limits or abolishes cash bail altogether. But progress is slow, and resistance, especially from powerful law enforcement lobbies, is fierce. Sinatra's story reminds us, reform isn't just necessary. It's urgent. Because for every Sinatra Jordan who gets out, there are countless others still waiting, still forgotten, still fighting a system designed to break them. And until we demand real, structural change, not just tweaks around the edges, but deep, transformational reform, we'll keep seeing these stories. Again and again. Sinatra Jordan is home now. But the scars of his ordeal, the lost time, the broken trust, the nights he'll never get back, those don't just disappear. And his story? It's not the last of its kind. Unless we make sure of it. Because here's the truth, no one is safe in a system that can snatch away your freedom without proof. No one is safe when justice depends more on money and skin color than on facts. And no one is safe when silence becomes the default response to injustice. Sinatra's fight exposed cracks in the system. But exposing them isn't enough, we have to keep pushing until those cracks widen and the whole rotten structure starts to fall. So what can you do? First, stay informed. Learn about the bail system in your state. Support organizations that fight for criminal justice reform, groups like the Bail Project, Color of Change, and local grassroots movements in your community. Donate if you can. Volunteer if you're able. Second, use your voice. Share stories like Sinatra's. Amplify them. Talk about them with your friends, your family, your coworkers. Because the more we shine a light on these injustices, the harder it becomes for the system to hide them. And finally, don't underestimate your power. Policies change when people demand it, loudly, consistently, relentlessly. Whether it's signing petitions, showing up at protests, or voting for leaders who actually care about reform, every action counts. Sinatra's story is a warning. But it's also a call. A call to refuse silence. A call to fight for a justice system that truly lives up to its name. And a call to remember that behind every statistic, every headline, there's a human being, a life that matters. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Speak out. And be part of the change. Thanks for watching. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of this story? Have you ever experienced something similar, or know someone who has? Drop a comment below and let's keep this conversation going. And if you have a story to share, you can email us anonymously. The address is in the video description. Every story matters.